Yeah. This is the one that hurts. This is the whole reason why I made this series. It's time to address the 7-year storm. The year is 2012. Adelaide are bundled out by Hawthorn in a tense preliminary final with tensions boiling over an umpiring performance I still haven't forgiven. Still, things are good. Kurt Tippett, at the time considered decent, is looking to leave, and the Crows line up a trade deal with Sydney for Jesse White, who was not decent. In fact, he was garbage. Perhaps sensing this, the Crows cancelled the deal last minute, among mumblings that Tippett had been receiving illegal third-party payments. Adelaide had rated Tippett quite highly when they gave him his second contract in 2009, after an amazing 55-goal second season. They made him the highest paid player at the club at 22 years old, with only 72 goals from 43 games to his name. In addition, they gave Tippett a clause in which he could, in 2012, leave freely for the club of his choice, provided that that club offered a second-round pick, which typically would never be a good enough offer for the highest paid player at any club. It was a dumb contract, but the Crows were desperate. As you may recall, when they drafted him, they had absolutely no history of having any decent key forwards, so you can understand these moves. But the real dumb play was this. The Crows paid up to $200,000 outside of the salary cap to this youngster, who would never match or even get within 10 goals of that 2009 tally. The AFL investigated. The Crows pleaded guilty early and surrendered their 2012 first and second round picks. The AFL ruled that Tippett would be banned for the first half of the 2013 season and fined $50,000. The Crows get a $300,000 fine. So the Crows lose Tippett for nothing. Their quite brilliant CEO, Stephen Trigg, was suspended and essentially forced to leave the club. The Crows then dipped to 11th in 2013. The AFL thought this insufficient though, and had slapped the 2013 first and second rounders out of their hands too. Allowed to trade for picks though, the Crows ironically had their best draft in years. Tippett did end up going to the Swans, at that point a reigning premier, in the pre-season draft. He had a powerful finish to 2013, on pace for third in the AFL goal kicking had he played the full season. However, in a twist of schadenfreude for the Crows, he would only play 62 more games for the Swans, with no real statistical clue of his $800,000 a year salary, and he lost both grand finals that he ever played in. It was tough, but as fans we thought we could recover. This was as bad as things were going to get. It wasn't. 2013 was god-awful in terms of pure wins. It was a stuttering start by the time Carlton rolled around, and it was a doomed start once this happened. No Taylor Walker meant a 50-goal hole in the forward line, which turned into 100 when you remember Tippett had gone as well. The Crows capitulated in their absence. There were a few highlights though to prevent the year from becoming a complete waste. Recent recruits Kerridge, Laird, Crouch and Brown all got Rising Star nominations, a record 4 for the year for the Crows. Patrick Dangerfield had another superb season, and young Rory Sloane finally developed into a star midfielder in his own right, winning his first Malcolm Blight medal. And of the meagre 10 wins in a forgettable 2013, 3 somehow managed to stand out as some of the most memorable in the Crows' 30-year history. Round 7. Spotless Stadium. Adelaide are faced with a prime opportunity to play themselves into form against a giant side that will be the first team in almost 20 years to win only one game in a season. The Crows go to work early with a 4-goal first term full of missed chances. Then, about 13 minutes into the second, Tom Lynch enters the game. This is Lynch's second season in Adelaide after his stint at the Saints never really got going. He was traded in a deal that sent Yvonne Marriage to Richmond, and played a handful of games in 2012, struggling to break into one of the best ever forward lines the Crows had assembled. After Tippett and Johncock had departed the side, Lynch stepped in with a new role as a flanker cum wingman, a role prototyped by Matthew Richardson in his not quite Brownlow winning 2008 year. Lynch immediately took to the role with increased disposal, tackle and inside 50 numbers, but he'd only kicked 13 goals in his first 15 games. Now, I liked him already, but that's because I'm a bit of a sado and played games with footy chips and dice to entertain myself. Lynch's chip, along with Matthew Bates for some reason, seemed to kick a disproportionate amount of goals in this game. So he was one of my favourites, but even I knew he had to make a statement to stay in the side and keep his AFL dream alive. He scored 2 goals in a row as Adelaide went on a tear. Patrick Dangerfield shifted forward, adding 2 of his own, and even Daniel Talia was joining the fun, before Lynch's third took Adelaide's half-time lead to 55. Now again, what's said in the huddles at the half is always a mystery to me, but Lynchy must have had a double helping, because he was about to explode. Darren Jarman's final term in the 1997 Grand Final will never be topped, but he took almost half an hour to kick his 5 goals. Lynch kicked 4 in 13 minutes, and 6 across the whole third quarter. And it wasn't just set shots and Joe the Gooses though, as he was giving GWS defenders career re-evaluations with marks like this, and giving Josh Bruce nightmares with plays like this. Early in the last, Lynch makes mincemeat of Devon Smith and becomes the third, and most recent, Crow to kick 10 goals in a game, and became the least experienced player in the competition to do so since Tony Modra himself. This haul would end up giving the humble Link man his only leading goal scorer trophy, making up almost a third of all his goals that season. Oh, and one more thing. You see that guy? The one that Lynch made a mockery of on his way to 10 goals? Well, he went on and did this. Funny how things work. Round 9, Etihad Stadium. Adelaide had overcome a 39-point margin to close it to 10 at half-time before North Melbourne kicked away again in the third. North led by 30, with just over 9 minutes left in the final quarter. Sam Kerridge was having a breakout game, kicking 3 in the second quarter, and had the ball in his hands here. He kicked his 4th, but there was still a 4-goal margin to overcome, with about 4 minutes left. Time for the young man to score again. It was incredible. This kid was nailing everything he touched. He needed some more help up forward though, and he'd be helped by 2 more unlikely heroes. After Sam Wright blows a chance to ice the game, a whole ground rebound finds a man who gets his 10th inside 50 for the day, before Richie Douglas sews the opportunity up himself. Douglas had acted as a second for Dangerfield as Thompson was being unusually quiet, and he was pivotal in that second quarter comeback. After Wright again blows it by giving away a free, another whole ground rebound finds that man again. Sam Kerridge nails a half dozen, and the Crows have another chance a few seconds later. Jared Petrenko was given the 23 after McLeod retired, ensuring an Indigenous link with the number that still remains to this day. Sadly though, the number was the only thing they really shared, as Petrenko was merely an average forward pocket with slightly above average tackle numbers. He rarely kicks goals, and by this point his career is on the decline, unbeknownst to him. He was lucky to even play today, as he was a late inclusion that morning for Matthew Wright. It was also Indigenous round, explaining the black where the Crows' royal blue should be on their jerseys. More people may remember Jared Petrenko for his house rules stint than his footy career, but he was about to ensure that, no matter what, he'd leave a legacy at the Adelaide Football Club. He missed this shot at goal. Seemingly disastrous, but it reduced the margin to under a goal. But North had the ball, and all they had to do was hold onto the ball and kick it defensively. They didn't, because 2013 North couldn't hold a lead if it were glued to their collective hands. A dumb kick, a pack and a rebound, and then Petrie has it again. Surely he learns from his mistake, surely he plays it short, he wouldn't just bomb it again. Drew, you're making this far too easy. And then it plays out. Jenkins, with a great effort, almost gets done for holding the ball. Kerridge, the rookie who's done so much today, with one last chance. A pack of kangaroos that Ben Rutten holds off pretty much single-handedly. And then, our man Petrenko. In a round celebrating the league's Indigenous players, it was only fitting that he was the recipient of this moment. He would later say that he'd never felt anything like he did after that game. It was time to be a hero.
Anything can happen here. Here we go. It's a goal. Can you believe it? It's extraordinary.
Petrenko would only play another 11 games after that. But it didn't matter. He was a hero. One of those games was round 22 of that year. Adelaide can't make the finals and they're up against an awful Melbourne side. It's a meaningless game, but the most meaningful of all. Football Park had served the Crows and Power well for 25 years, but now it was going away. Adelaide Oval was going to be the new home of football, and all that was left to do was farewell the old girl in the most comprehensive way possible. It wasn't even the last game at the venue. Port would get that honour, which is slightly criminal, but the match they produced was at least memorable. This was as forgettable as anything, with Lewis Johnston providing yet another weirdly good performance from a basically unknown player, a theme of 2013 for Adelaide. But now, the Crows would play in world-class facilities with their 3 towers back together. It just had to go well. Another man playing that day is this fellow, Kyle Hartigan. He became pretty much the epitome of the Crows' drafting, development and list management strategies over the 2010s. Draft dross, make them okay-ish, and then, even if they're crap, just never get rid of them. He is my mortal enemy. Slight tangent, this is Alex Keith. When this lanky ex-cricketer debuted for the Crows in 2017, I thought he was the worst player in the AFL. He committed a clanger, or a blunderous, often unforced error, with 25% of his disposals. He, however, rapidly improved and won the first Showdown medal of 2019, which proved me wrong. I'll admit that freely. He may have even become one of my favourites in doing so, and the fact that we lost him so soon afterwards caused no small disappointment. The title of worst in the league then defaulted to Kyle Hartigan. While on one of my long and too often rants about this man, I was asked to prove that he was the worst player in the AFL. So I did. This is every tall defender who is comparable to Hartigan in that they were teammates, they were from the same draft class, or had similar career spans, or played a similar amount of games. They are plotted by their defensive acts per game against their clanger percentage. Darcy Gardner, the only player more unlikely to unleash a clanger, has Hartigan covered defensively by a larger margin than his own clanger deficiency. In his era, like for like, Hartigan is the worst that there is. And that's the sort of guy Adelaide models themselves on and allows to play over 100 games. Rory Atkins, Wayne Miller, Jordan Gallucci, Ian Perry, Ken McGregor, David McKay, they never get rid of them. They hang on to them like a hoarder hoping they'll accrue value. The tragedy here is that I had to watch this limp mule hoof the ball to the opposition on their 50, about as often as older fans got to watch Tony Modra. There's one more 2013 tale to tell that's perhaps the most telling of all. It's round 19, the final showdown at Football Park. It's been a great game, but 21 minutes into the final term, Ricky Henderson puts the game to bed. Port have 5 minutes to dig themselves out of a hole. Gray starts the comeback and Wingard adds another. And then it happens. Cam O'Shea and Jackson Trengove, 2 of the very worst players I have ever seen at this level, hoof the ball out to Angus Monfries. The experienced small forward is one-on-one with the still young, very tall Daniel Talia, who he monsters at ground level. The Kurt Tippett saga was what kicked off the 7-year storm. The Walker injury threw it into second gear. But what you're about to witness is pure dark magic. The sort of thing that doesn't just demoralise a club and fan base, but is retroactively viewed as the start of a hex, a curse, a plague upon a house occurs. This is the moment that all hope is lost. This is the point the storm launches into overdrive. All resistance vanished. The Crows had stopped fighting the current. They had begun to embrace it, let it run right through them, and drown them. This was supposed to be the low point, but it was about to get a whole lot lower. The year is 2014. Brenton Sanderson is starting to lose his way with the team, his game plan unravelling with no plan B. His captain is out for the season, hit by a sled in one of the unluckiest incidents you can imagine. He needs Dean Bailey, his right-hand man and lead assistant, to help him out. Bailey is a better strategist than his record with an awful Melbourne side suggests, and he was a key part of 2012's success. Unfortunately, Bailey is diagnosed with lung cancer and passes away as the 2014 season kicks off. This tragedy, of course, came hot on the heels of the draft pick sanctions and 2012's unlucky elimination. It also came hot on the heels of a freak set of pre-season injuries in 2013 and murmurs that the club had signed Eddie Betts illegally, which they hadn't. Oh, and also their new star keyback almost losing his license, trying to clear up his cat's vomit as he blasted down a highway. Not a tragedy, more foreshadowing the laughingstock that the Crows would become by decade's end. The Crows drift their way to an even more forgettable 10th place, which dooms Sanderson. The season finished on a weird little high though, as Ben Rutten in his final game strolls up forward and kicks a magnificent goal. If you'll remember, his first 3 kicks were goals, and with this kick, he became perhaps the only player ever to bookend his career, kick-wise, with goals. This demented parlour trick, as well as the mounting off-field dramas and issues, were perhaps a clue that the club was cursed. We'd soon have some very real evidence to back that up. The year is 2015. Led by the miracle that is Eddie Betts, who I'll get to in a bit, new coach Phil Walsh is doing well in his rookie season, having guided the Crows to be well in the top 8 after 12 rounds. He was a popular figure across the state, having been an assistant coach at Port for years. He had inspired a talented young team to play great football, and he was destined for great things. I'll never forget waking up to my radio alarm as it announced the murder of Phil Walsh on the 3rd of July. I'm not going to go into detail, it's still an uncomfortable subject and not what this video is about. Its effect on the club, though, very much is. The next match was cancelled, with the Crows receiving 2 more premiership points than we likely would have earned that day. The still grieving Adelaide got battered in their first match back. The emotional scenes of the players consoling themselves afterwards powerfully conveyed the team's sorrow, but also their unity. Add to this a near life-threatening skull injury to Brent Riley at training, which ended his career, and you had a side that had to deal with a lot of dark emotions in a short amount of time. This unity, though, galvanised the players, and under Scott Camporelli, they won 6 of the next 8, including one of the greatest showdowns of all time. The Phil Walsh Showdown, as it came to be known, had everything. Coming the week after that Eagles game, the Adelaide lads came out strong. Adelaide led from the start, with Scott Thompson providing game highs in disposals and tackles. 6 men kicked 3 goals. 2 Crows had 13 clearances. Matthew Broadbent went for 660 metres gained. Everywhere you looked, players were putting in season or career best numbers. An injury to Daniel Talia allowed Port to get back in the game, and when Robbie Gray goaled deep into the last, it looked like the Power were going to roll a Crows outfit who hadn't scored a goal of their own for half an hour. But the bell went, sealing a memorable, emotional, and much needed win. They scraped into the finals due to splitting those points with Geelong, who beat the Crows convincingly in the final round of the season. Taylor Walker showed his class, leading a tight victory against the Bulldogs before yet another semi-final exit, this time a drubbing at the hands of a far superior Hawthorn. Still, there was cause for celebration. The team had ridden together through hell. They'd stick together, and nothing could break them. No force could tear them asunder. Well, except for one bloke. Here is Patrick Dangerfield, having the Brownlow medal draped around his neck. A great moment for the Crows, right? Well, no, considering that this is what he was wearing the week before. Although Dangerfield had made no secret of his plans to eventually move closer to his home at Moggs Creek, it still came as a shock that he decided to do it now. The Crows had a choice: trade him off when he had value, or get one more season out of their new Malcolm Blight medalist and let him leave for free. The Crows traded him very early in the trade period, not driving as hard a bargain as they could. And oh boy did they get stiffed. You'd expect the Crows to crumble further from here. But, like Hawthorn when Lance Franklin left, the Crows filled the void with their B-listers and were stronger for it. The forward line, once our weakness, was now the very best in the league. Eddie Betts had gone from cult hero to Adelaidean god, lifting McGovern, Walker, Jenkins, Cameron and Lynch to their best seasons. In fact, I'm going to go on a tangent to show you just how rare it was for an Adelaide forward line, or indeed any forward line, to be this good. In terms of pure numbers, the 2012 season was the benchmark for Adelaide, well above the second-ranked 2006 season, and not even leading the league in scoring. And then they do this! Look how far above second place they were in scoring. This was a total anomaly, riding on the back of the performances of three men in particular. Adelaide haven't won a Coleman medal since Tony Modra's last full season in South Australia back in 1997. Looking back, they haven't even come close. But in 2016, they had two contenders all season long in Walker and Betts, with Josh Jenkins hanging around to complete a rare feat. These are all the teams to have three men in the top 15 in goal scoring in the AFL era. It just doesn't happen. And then Adelaide got three in the top 10. And as for Eddie Betts, well, Eddie Betts was great at Carlton, but when he came to Adelaide, he rewrote what a small forward could do. In 2013, Betts had scored just over half of the leading small forwards goal tally, which was Lindsay Thomas on 53, a full 19 goals behind Coleman medal winner Roughhead. In Betts' career, not only had small forwards broken past 60 goals only twice, but he'd only got within 10 of the leading small forward twice. And then, in his first season in the City of Churches, he cracked 50. He led the small brigade for the first time in his career, and he wasn't done. In 2015, Betts became the first small forward in the AFL era to finish second in league goal scoring. He was irresistible, only going goalless in Adelaide's semi-final annihilation at the hands of the Hawks. Most, if not all, observers thought that that was his ceiling, that he couldn't do better than that. And they were wrong. Eddie Betts' 2016 is the stuff of legends. Third in overall goal scoring. 28 goals ahead of the next small forward. 2 hauls of 6 goals and 5 of 5. 70% goal scoring accuracy. 24 goal assists, which was actually low for his Crows tenure. No other small forward has come close to replicating this. And for all their trouble, the Crows finished 5th. Their midfield was still in a state of flux, with Matt Crouch being okay but not quite on the level of the gold jacket wearing Sloane. Thompson was on his way out and Talia had to battle manfully without Rutten to help him out. After all, trading Rutten for Hardigan is like trading, well, a truck for some sort of Eastern European larder substitute. They blew a chance against the Eagles at home for a top 2 spot, but made the most of their only home final. Eddie Betts destroyed North Melbourne before Sydney quite convincingly outclassed the side, with Josh Kennedy making new coach Don Pike wish he'd stayed at home. But it was only going to get better. The 2017 Crows were incredible. The Crouch brothers were now superstars, and with their help, the Crows were the best at getting the ball. They were still the best at scoring with it. They were the best at creating chances. They were the best at getting and giving the ball in contested situations. Their forwards were the best at marking. They were the best in the ruck contests, helping them be among the best with clearances. They were the best at dominating individual games. They were the best at going the extra distance. Again, they had 3 forwards in the top 15 scorers. They were, simply put, the best. As a fan, it was great. We never dipped lower than second all season. We looked invincible at times, beating crosstown rivals Port Adelaide by 14 goals, and coming back from 50 down to draw against Collingwood. We won both our finals games by a combined margin of 100 points. We brought the snake Dangerfield back to our house, and we took him behind the sheds with a bicycle chain. And then I was unlucky enough to be on a plane flight back to Adelaide during the first quarter of the grand final. By the time I got to the television at home, Richmond was in front, and they stayed there. Combined with the fact that both of Adelaide's premiership wins were within 20 months of my birth, that means I've never seen my team lead a grand final, and that just kills me. I'm not going to go into detail about the Crows' capitulation from a first quarter lead because, frankly, I don't want to. There's professional commentators out there who can tell you how the fleet-footed, team-oriented Richmond unit beat an infighting, overconfident Adelaide side. There's thousands of fans that can tell you Dustin Martin's Norm Smith was a bunch of media-driven dog shit and should have gone to Basher Hooley or Alex Rance, who were everywhere when we were trying to attack. All I'll say is that we were the best team in the AFL, and we got cowed by a team that had finished 13th the year before. We blew our chance. We blew the chance in more ways than one. You see, this image could very easily have looked like this. According to his manager, the Crows had matched North Melbourne's mega $11 million deal over 9 seasons, and were the young midfielder's preferred choice until that bean-counting ex-power ass decided to direct Dusty back towards Punt Road. It's been said by some that had Adelaide won that match, Dusty would have come here, but I don't believe him. But hey, from here, a football club goes one of two well-trodden paths. They can use the loss to galvanise them and drive them on to future success, or at least attempts at it. Or they could completely drop the bundle and fall like a brick. This team had been through a lot over the last 4.5 years, so you'd think that they'd naturally be able to bounce back with that great team spirit that they had. We certainly thought that, even after a couple of stars left the club to be with what they loved. Charlie Cameron to his family, Jake Lever to a big bag of cash. We looked like we could survive. All the Crows needed was to regroup, to look ahead, to focus on their strengths. Or, and hear me out on this one, they could hire a bunch of charlatans to set up a freakish pre-season camp where the players were physically and mentally tortured in the middle of nowhere like a cross between Saw and fucking Wolf Creek. No one knows for sure what happened on this fucking bizarre adventure, as the players were apparently ordered to sign non-disclosure agreements before they went. But a few allegations that have surfaced, despite them being a bit tenuous in terms of their source, just get you thinking what the hell was going through their minds. As a result, Adelaide's 2018 was by far the worst season we as fans enjoyed expectations-wise, as a very good club was hobbled with injuries both emotional and physical, lumbering to 12th, their worst finish since the disastrous end to that Neil Craig era. Our fitness department was sacked in its entirety, including club cult icon Brett Burton. Heads were beginning to roll as a result of that pre-season debacle, and Pike had to put his ass into gear. They'd also lost their talisman in the intervening time. Scott Thompson hadn't been the club's best midfielder for a couple of years, but he still led Adelaide for clearances in 2016, averaging 24 disposals in each of his 22 games. Come 2017, however, the 34-year-old was suddenly too slow, with Pike suggesting a move to half-back. This never really happened, Thompson playing only one senior game for the year. He won the SANFL Affiliates Best and Fairest, but retired during the season as he sensed that his time was up. As with Modra before him, he had a weak finish that belied the player that he really was. A 10 disposal, 5 tackle, 5 clanger, 5 frees against disaster class, which was his 269th and last match in the blue, gold and red. All the while, the men's team had ceased to be the relevant Crows. Beck Goddard and former Crow Matthew Clark had formed a dynasty in the newly formed Women's AFL comp, coaching 2 of the first 3 premierships available. And during the recording of this series, they came so close to tacking on another one. Clark, who'd come so close to tasting the ultimate prize for the Crows, and whose former club in Brisbane went on to be dominant right after he was traded, finally got his trophy by winning in absurdly dominating fashion in 2019. But clearly that scared him so much that he fell short the second time around. The men had to wait 7 years for their first success, and 13 to win the league MVP. The women did both on debut. Erin Phillips, who played basketball for Australia, showed how inadequate some of the men's team were by winning 2 league MVPs and winning best on ground in the 2019 grand final despite injuring her ACL in the 3rd quarter. The stars in the tricolours weren't Sloane or Walker anymore. They were Ebony Marinov, Chelsea Randall and Sarah Perkins. It was out with Scott Thompson and in with Stevie Lee Thompson. The men's team weren't just being dogged by what they could have been anymore. They were also being overshadowed by what was. And because of their problems now, there were worries over what would become of them. But you see, the Crows had found a way to destroy their past and future all in one go. 10 years after the Bryce Gibbs debacle, they'd finally wrangled some father-son selections of their own. And for Sons of Guns, you can't ask for a finer pedigree than Tyson Edwards and Darren Jarman. Jackson and Ben, respectively, looked like fine talents, but both were delisted simultaneously, with Edwards having been a Crow for less days than the amount of matches his father played. Rumour has it that it affected brother Luke so much that he flatly rejected the idea of being a father-son pick himself. It was a mess of list management, so much so that the pick the Eagles used on the son of an Adelaide legend was one that used to belong to Adelaide. To the end of 2021, the only father-son link to have both played for Adelaide didn't even get selected as a father-son pick. That curse that keeps popping up wasn't just affecting people anymore, and it wasn't even just affecting the entity that was the Adelaide Football Club. It was now affecting the very game of football itself, literally shifting goalposts in changing the definition of what a goal truly was. Josh Jenkins infamously kicked a ghost goal, kicked after the siren, but with the umpires never hearing it, it was allowed. You see, much as Seattle's Seahawks Stadium reflected noise resulting in the famous Beastquake, the new Adelaide Oval Riverbank stand packed so many people and reflected so much sound that it outmatched the loudest siren in Australia. 4 years later, the same man at the same ground kicked a behind so blatant he admitted to thinking it so. However, the league's objectively awful score review system maintained that it was a goal, and that goal just so happened to win the match for Adelaide in a showdown, which went down well. Perhaps understandably, Jenkins soon sought the refuge of Geelong, but curses don't lift so easy for some. The 2018 Adelaide leading scorer has, so far, played only 2 games in the white and blue, and he was just one of a busload to go. Greenwood, Ellis Yeoman, McGovern, Otten, Douglas and Keith joined him in leaving just that year alone, with McGovern citing the pre-season camp of 2018 as one of the main reasons for his departure. Even worse was the state of the Three Towers. After some 2018 injuries, Walker had his worst full season in his career, dipping below 2 goals a game. Talia's role would change to cover the defensive liabilities that were Hardigan and Jake Kelly, reducing his production in some areas. And Sam Jacobs, one of only 6 men to record 1,000 hitouts in a calendar year. The 3-time showdown medalist, the man who'd never dipped outside the top 5 in league hitouts whilst in the tricolours, copped an injury halfway through demolishing Callum Sinclair's Sydney. He was replaced by the younger, more mobile Riley O'Brien, and the writing was on the wall for the 31-year-old. They brought him back for a farewell tour, and his last game before departing for GWS was a vintage 56 hit out, 15 disposal display. And the final dagger was the departure of the mercurial Eddie Betts. His 310 goals contained some of the finest finishes ever seen. He had a pocket named for his exploits within 15 weeks of debuting. He rewrote what it was possible for a small forward to do in the modern game. But he too cited the pre-season camp as a reason for his departure, in particular elements that mocked his cultural heritage. Adelaide had alienated yet another goal-kicking icon. He left his baying Adelaide faithful one departing gift. A beautiful check side from the pocket that wasn't his, but was his. 3 goals of the year came from that pocket, including this goal, one of 12 he racked up on the Suns in his last Crows season. But in 2020, with part of his salary still being paid by the Crows, he would head back home to Carlton. Actually, speaking of Carlton players coming home, remember this fellow? Well, he wears this now. And trust me, seeing Bryce Gibbs in the red, gold and blue was like seeing your father come back from getting those ciggies and milk all those years ago. And much like that father, further examination proved that he was a different man now, and it wasn't really worth the effort. His first season saw decent performances from the flanks, but his 2019 season contained some lacklustre efforts. He was dropped amid rumours of gambling debts, debauchery and other unfounded allegations. He seemed to have become a scapegoat for Pike. There were rumours that he wanted to leave too. He eventually retired after failing to crack the Crows' 2020 side, which, as you'll see in the next part, wasn't exactly a tough team to get into. Perhaps part of the problem was this. You see, Tony Modra felt betrayed by the Crows when Blighty sent him west. It took him until 2015, his inauguration as a founding member of the Crows Hall of Fame, to fully come to peace and drop hostilities with the club. But his ill feelings were absorbed by his iconic iconography, his number 6 jersey. James Byrne, Ben Nelson, Fergus Watson, Jonathan Griffin all wore it during the prime of his hatred. Then tensions dropped as Modra questioned where his heart truly lay. Jack Gunston and Jake Lever both arrived, and both left acrimoniously during this period. Sure, the more recent iconic numbers unearthed heroes and talent many times over, but the original altar had been defaced. Earlier, I mentioned a curse had befell the club. If there was any physical manifestation, any visible symbol of it, it was what Bryce Gibbs wore through his 3 seasons at the club that, arguably, should have had him far longer than that. The talented Jackson Haitley bears that weight now, and good luck to him. But even though Gibbs joined the tide of players who were already rushing to get off this ride, Pike wasn't done yet. He seemed to hide his maniacal tendencies until now. Bereft of ideas, he started dropping star players and causing rifts among the player group. Taylor Walker began shaming every player who left instead of actually captaining the side. The Crows weren't horrible, but for a finals caliber team, they were nowhere near good enough. They sank to 11th, and various boards performed various reviews, internal and external, which resulted in the removal of Pike, as well as even more players and anyone who looked at them funny. This would be a good thing, right? I mean, removing the club culture by removing the club seemed, at the time, a decent idea to fix the wayward Crows. Instead, though, it led to their darkest hours. So that's the end of part 5. Thank you so much for watching. If you've been enjoying the series, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys for the conclusion of this series, hopefully coming out in October.